It made perfect sense to me to infuse some kind of individual personality to Reloaded and to Revolutions, but within the idea of looking to the first Matrix, so that Reloaded and Revolutions will be adding to the first Matrix experience rather than going off on some kind of weird tangent that had nothing to do with it. It's not a matter of improving on what I did in the Matrix. It was a matter of developing the ideas that we had established in the first movie. Even though it's not what you could call a thematic score, there is a thematic continuity. There was a Neo-Trinity love theme that just barely made a statement in the first Matrix and made a fairly strong statement in Reloaded. And then Revolutions, it kind of went to town. We wanted the feeling that it was the same movie, at least musically, that it was, you know, a continuum of these ideas. So the way I approached it was kind of like the second and third movement of a three-movement symphony, really. 4, 5, 6. A symphony, in basic lay terms, is a really long orchestral piece, and they're normally broken up into movements. I think I was able to give Reloaded and Revolutions a unique personality to the music, but in terms of style, and it really is a matter of style, I think I was able to keep some continuity going. Okay. And for 14, I'd like everybody to come down a notch.
Notice it getting higher and lower. We tune them to actual pitches to go with the bass line of the orchestra.
Hubcap mixing bowl, some brass rods welded.
And I think a new number stand on
Exhaust pipe tailpiece.
Sure looks like a big stand film.
And a garden variety bass bow.
Violins, 34, the upbeat of 3 tied to a dotted half note.
That's not something too many people do.
Not that many composers use that technique. I would still love it. It's pretty mysterious and eerie.
It's more of a gesture than a theme. That really got me through quite a few moments in Reloaded. There's a gesture with the brass. You know, say the trumpet section was playing a triad, and they'd start soft and get really loud, and at the same time, the horns were playing a different triad, and they'd start loud and get soft. And this worked very well symbolically between this musical concept and the underlying structure of the Matrix story. I thought Osiris was a brilliant piece of filmmaking. It had the same effect on me as I think it had on the audience in drawing the audience back into the Matrix world. It was a chance to reach into that well again and apply it to this short picture before I jumped into Reloaded. And actually, that was a big help for me. The other animes weren't quite stylistically in the same arena as the Matrix, so each of those kind of had to be approached as an individual entity. Detective story about this hard-boiled detective. I kind of approached it like a 1950s film noir thing with a little bit of a jazz feel that had nothing to do with anything in the Matrix. But the Final Flight definitely got the juices flowing and was just the ticket for Reloaded. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I think the most striking element is the use of the choir, which was really, really a lot of fun. There shouldn't be a lot of vibrato. I'd say just kind of a subtle vibrato. Poco vibrato. The way that came about is that Larry and Andy initially told me they wanted a major choir statement in what they called the Super Burly Brawl, which was the final cataclysmic confrontation between Neil and Smith. And I thought that was a really excellent idea, but I knew that we needed to have a text for the choir to sing, or else it wouldn't, it really wouldn't function properly. So I asked them if they could find something that was in the public domain that reflected the ideology that they were referring to in all three pictures. I suggested that it preferably would not be in English, and even better would be in a dead language like Latin. So my feeling was that if the choir was singing in English, and saying, "This is the one, watch what he does," it would be really antithetical to everything that they came up with. So I think it was Larry who came up with the idea of using passages from the Upanishads, which are the ancient Vedic scriptures that the Hindu religion is based on. And he wanted to do it in the original Sanskrit. And when I saw the passages that they had chosen, I was astonished at how well integrated these ancient writings were to the entire ideology that Larry and Andy had come up with for the whole thing. These are referencing the one. From delusion, lead me to truth. From darkness, lead me to light. From death, lead me to immortality. I thought that it raised the level of the integration between the music and the action, exponentially. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that the epic nature of the film was reflected in the music, and the conclusion of this mythology made for a very satisfying end to it. So I was particularly pleased by this epic nature, and I thought that the choir and the orchestra in the Super Burly Brawl was really kind of a wonderful moment for me.
It's pretty crazy, because we've been in Australia, this is about a full year for me now. And I'm excited to be going home, but it feels very displaced, like it's hard to believe this is all over here. But I'm very glad it's over in the sense that now we can really begin what I love to do, which is I have all the film in front of me, more or less, except for a lot of visual effects shots that are still going to be coming in, and getting it to be a whole movie.
Right.
We've been
concentrate on.
Yeah, that's all I've got to focus on now. Dailies are over. I'll have Larry and Andy's attention 100%, and it's going to be great. From the very beginning of these movies, before we ever shot The Matrix, Larry and Andy had designed a trilogy, not knowing if they would ever get beyond the first movie, because they understand the economics of making movies, and they know that in order to complete a trilogy, the first movie has to be successful. So we never knew for sure that we were going to make Reloaded and Revolutions, but that was always the intent. I always tried very hard to see it as a 4-hour movie, because it's clear when you leave Reloaded and when you start Revolutions, you're in the same physical place. The movies were shot concurrently, so I had sort of a rough assembly of most of both movies within a month after we finished shooting. Luckily, we had extensive previs of the visual effects sections that were not shot, and so by using those in the cut, that served me very well. You wanted to see the rest of the editing room, right?
Behind the magic.
All right. So out here, Catherine, did you say hi?
Hello.
It's Catherine Chase, and
Hi.
Catherine's going to be on the movie the entire time. As Catherine's a first assistant, Dave is also a first assistant. His area is mostly working with the Avid. Catherine mostly works with the film. Now here we get two with one blow. Standing with Catherine right now are Allison and Jenny. Jenny's the second assistant editor. Allison's our apprentice. Allison was with me on the first Matrix. She was our projectionist.
What do? I help with dailies. I make leaders, which is what I'm doing now. And I code the film. Do you want to have a look?
What does that do?
It actually puts rubber numbers on the sprockets on the edge of the film. So when they come to post and they need to cut the film, they run off the code numbers.
At last.
When you shoot a conventional movie, you're shooting a big dialogue scene. Basically, the director ends up shooting a lot of coverage. You know, you shoot close-ups and two shots and over the shoulders, and you put all that together into a scene. When you're shooting something like a wire fight, the stuff is pretty tightly choreographed. And what you'll end up doing is maybe doing multiple cameras and a certain amount of overlapping action, meaning that the actor leaps through the air and lands a punch. So maybe the punch is overlapped. And the next shot picks up, simulating the leap, jumping down and starting to punch and then going into the next stage of the fight. Your options in scenes like that are angles and overall pacing. The freeway scene is, I think at its heart, a conventional in-camera scene that heavily uses visual effects to realize its vision, but at its heart, it's shot in camera. I mean, I don't see how as an editor you read this scene and you say, you just sort of rub your hands together. The scene is 15 minutes long. It's just all about editing. The thing that's great about the way Andy and Larry shoot is almost every angle introduces new information. Reloaded is truly going to be the sum of a lot of small scenes. It's going to be very, very densely paced. It's going to be really fast. Although there are times we're really going to just sort of slow it down for these very, very difficult dialogue scenes. And to try to find that overall balance is going to be a lot of fun and really interesting. This is our visual effects division of editorial. Jody is the visual effects editor. Bridget is the assistant visual effects editor. Why don't you talk to these guys?
Basically, what we do is track and organize and manage all of the elements that they shoot on set. There are thousands and thousands. Once it comes here, Zach edits, and all the various elements that go along with the shot to composite it together go funnel through us. We scan it and send it on to the vendor. And
it's a really, really important job. It's a really big job because when I edit the scene, there's basically, I edit with what I call the hero element. And a lot of the stuff that's visual effects shots, they'll do, 8 or 10 passes in time. They'll do passes for backgrounds and passes for elements like smoke or atmosphere and passes for lighting, and they'll do clean passes so that you can take something out of a frame. And so Jody works very carefully with the visual effects people across the hall to make sure they get everything they need. And she sits in.
He doesn't work carefully at all.
One of the things I really like about Revolutions is the fact that the first half of the movie is, at least by Matrix terms, a fairly conventional movie. And then the second half, once the siege starts, it's almost nonstop action. I tried very hard to keep the first half of the movie tense, because the whole movie is ultimately going to have a very tense vibe to it, right up till the very end. There are small things, like how often the so-called 180-degree rule gets broken, which I think probably most of the people who are watching this understand, but it simply means that if you have a circle and you've divided it in half, and the camera's on one side of that circle, on the next cut it should not cross that line to the second half, to the other half of that circle. So in the case of the Wachowski brothers, they have a certain very organic idea of how they're shooting things. And if that idea occasionally encompasses things like breaking the 180-degree rule, they've thought it through very carefully in advance.
You're empty. So are you.
If you notice, it tends to mostly get broken in the fight scenes. Because, and it's really, I'll tell you something, it's a simple approach to coverage. But once you've done it enough, then it can become an interesting bit of style, a bit of craft. When we made The Siege, I took the previses, I worked with them extensively, showed them to Larry and Andy, and we made extensive changes, both in the shots that ended up in the movies and the shots we deleted. We were able to use it as a tool for cost effectiveness, for time effectiveness, for just making the scene. I personally feel very lucky to have been able to participate on these 3 movies because they really give you a palette and a chance to do work that I love doing.
My crew and I, really one of our edicts to ourselves is to never repeat ourselves. We make it part of our operating principle that we don't just use the same material. But especially something like Reloaded and Revolutions, we wanted everything to sound new to us and to the audience. Recording sound effects is part of the sound post process that nobody wants to think about. You know, nobody certainly wants to pay for it. So we have to find very, very cost-effective ways of doing these really crazy things. In a lot of ways, they're commensurate in difficulty with what they're having to shoot visually, you know? Microphones really are our instruments, but we do endanger them a lot. We don't have the equivalent of a long lens at all. You know, microphones are best up close.
I bet that overloaded.
One of the challenges of the car chase was that it's very long and had to build. You know, there had to be some dynamic arc to the whole scene. We also knew that the music was going to be very prominent, you know, that driving techno music. So we knew there wasn't a whole lot of room there for a lot of subtlety. We started casting for the Ducati bike very early on also, which was a huge challenge. I mean, you wouldn't think it would be, but you can rarely use the exact same vehicle, you know, for the sound that you see on picture. We find cars that seem to have superpowers as far as aggressiveness and find ways to record those vehicles. And even vehicles like Niobe's are really great cars. We listened to a lot of cars and we blew up a really great car trying to get it to sound even more dramatic than it does. Sentinels were a very complex sound to begin with. You know, they each had between 10 and 16 tracks that are varying all the time and modulate with, you know, how the Sentinel's flying and what angle we're seeing them at. But now we had to extrapolate that into a huge flock of these things and yet still get some sense of frightening efficiency, you know, out of what we hear. Also, weapons had to be really created from scratch, from the ships to the giant towers. So we recorded lots and lots of gigantic caliber weapons using some more novel techniques. We had the Civil War cannon that fires 2-inch lead cannonballs. We fired that cannonball through lines of washing machines and all kinds of metal debris to get ripping sounds for the sounds of these giant large caliber bullets going through Sentinels from the siege scene. We wanted that to be a very unique, very painful, animalistic, gory metal sound.
You know your predecessors had much more respect.
When you experience a loud sound, especially a very transient sound like a gunshot in real life, emotionally what you're experiencing is that overload.
So that's what happens if you don't wait.
Yeah.
Gotta wear and protect your hearing.
What we try to do in movies is to recreate or emulate that feeling of having your hearing system overloaded. And we do that through limiting and compression techniques and distortion and overload techniques as well. The other factor also that's important is small caliber weapons really don't make that much of a sound. But it still has to be dramatic. So even as we're recording 22s, we're incorporating a little bit of something else in it. It's the same with fight sounds, obviously. The original library that we constructed had an arc to it. You know, the sounds in the original Matrix fights starts with a very natural kind of sound in the first training session in the dojo and ends up this insanely brutal sound when Smith and Neo are fighting in the subway tunnels. In order to create a new vocabulary of hits, instead of using my own body, as I so often do for fight sounds, we hired some professional fighters. We got these two jiu-jitsu pros and just got them into our studio and a couple of other studios and just had them beat the crap out of each other for what ended up being 4 days, you know, and throwing each other onto cement and having them run and slam their backs into each other and, you know, just to create a whole new library of violent, you know, body sound. But on top of the impact sounds, a very key part of the way the fight sound in the Matrix is the whooshes. We constructed an enormous collection of devices for making air whoosh, from you know, stacks of CDs with little spacers in between them, you know, being spun around, to all kinds of this weird metal technical grill. We would just swing them all around as hard as we could around microphones. You know, one of the most daunting challenges of the Matrix movies, and any movie that's highly visual effect heavy, is that we basically can't see the movie that we're working on, because the visual effects people are evolving the look of the movie simultaneous with us evolving the sound of the movie. From talking with Zach and Larry and Andy and John and people about what that really is going to comprise when it gets all rendered out, we can start to guess about the sound of it. In many cases, we don't see the movie until the audience does. I mean, if we see it finished before we ship the final soundtrack, the final print master of the movie, we're lucky. Well, the thing I like most about our work on the Matrix movies is just how significant the movies themselves have become. You know, that's very, very exciting and gratifying in a lot of ways. You know, and all of us in sound and in visuals, and Larry and Andy, and you know, everybody, and in music. I think we all feel like we work together to make something very rich, you know, and very whole.
On one machine, it would take more than a year to render this, so.
There was a time where I just thought it may just not happen at all. Like, the actual technology will not come through. The shots would not render.
Going from tens of gigabytes to tens of terabytes and tens of render servers to thousands of render servers. It's only 3.5 years since Matrix 1 was out.
A different interpretation with what we can do now and how the brothers wanted to take the story forward.
The scale of this one is just so much bigger. The whole sequences are much longer. There's more effect shots. There's these huge, self-contained, totally virtual shots.
It's about creating what we call virtual cinematography, things that you could not film.
Oh, that was a special moment right there, where we all were at our best. Even when we were at our worst, we were at our best.
It's been almost 4 years from pre-production to post. We look forward to catch up on some sleep.
It was a multinational effort, companies on 3 different continents working literally 24 hours a day. There's visual effects happening somewhere in the world.
We have all the visual effects shots within the Matrix world, which is about 1,200 shots. Kung fu, wire work, a lot of compositing, and then the synthetic human stuff. And then all the visual effects work in the real world, which is essentially 800 full CG shots.
It's just been a really excellent collaborative movie-making experience.
Here we go.
I love the material that giant killer robots did. The shots that we started working on were the Zion temple shots, which involved creating this gigantic cave underground below Zion where a lot of people congregate. But we needed to extend the set and make it feel much larger and add 10 to 20, 30 times more people than there were there. What we did is we shot about 50 different people dancing and standing and cheering, doing all sorts of different actions in front of a blue screen. And then we separated them all out and created a lot of little cards of people that we could distribute throughout the space.
They're kind of like game models. They're pretty low resolution. You can see when you get close to them, they get kind of chunky. And then when you pull back, they start to hold up a little bit more like real humans. When we rig them with simple skeletons so that any animation that we create on one character can be applied to another character.
We started with the original effect from the first film, and there's these sort of veins that grow over his body, and the veins sort of make his body melt away and go into the phone. But on this one, they wanted the veins to actually crack open and reveal sort of the data structure on the inside of their body. So we came up with this idea of the grid and the data blips on the inside from just drawing all sorts of different variations of what that grid may look like.
We're using this firm, BUF, B-U-F, from Paris. I gave them the assignment of code. Larry and Andy wanted to make a point that the code was like the fabric of life in the Matrix and that you could keep exponentially going into the detail.
How many people get asked to visualize an orgasm in code? That laid the groundwork for fascinating design discussions with men and women alike in the workplace about how to actually graphically depict the sensations, the sort of cyclical builds of vibrational energy. The way that BUF likes to work, they like getting photographic source material from which they dimensionalize and turn to graphics. So on that particular shoot, we had a motion control system that was doing repeat passes delicately, programmably through her legs. Luckily, the actress had a really great sense of humor.
That guy back a little bit.
And we had to do many different takes because BUF needed lighting effects happening upon the inner thighs of the actress. We did many of those passes and, in fact, had the costume department, Kim Barrett, make special aluminum underwear for the actress so that we could get a really sonic light at the end of the tunnel.
The city itself is another machination of Jeff Darrow and Larry and Andy's imagination.
My name's Craig Hayes. I was visual effects supervisor for Tippett Studio. For the work that we did on Matrix 3 Revolutions, which was primarily for the Machine City work, which was exciting for us because it's a big chunk of work, you know.
Question is, like, let's say if we have, you know, ridges and different elevation changes.
Yeah.
And we cluster. They're able to access really complex digital effects of all sorts. They understand character and character animation better than almost anybody in the industry.
Here is the chasm that where the Logos is going to come out of.
Right.
The power towers in the background. So these are all the fetus fields. It's always been kind of referred to as like a coral reef or some kind of a foreign kind of a landscape that's just teeming with life. We haven't had a tidal kind of movement. Like within the city itself, the buildings would be swaying and moving. Nothing was really static within the city. There was all these flocks of characters teeming about.
I tried to come up with an aesthetic that wasn't an aesthetic that we would recognize but was an aesthetic. I don't know if I succeeded, but that was the whole idea.
Some of the shots we started with were the fetus field reveal shots, you know, the power towers and just coming up over the edge. And just because of the sheer magnitude, you know, just there's tens of thousands of these fetus stocks. So getting some of those renders through was really a bear.
It was a collaboration, without a doubt. We really felt like, yeah, these guys understand this world and we are in good hands the whole way.
What I did like about this, the latter part, was this stuff we start to see on the horizon. So I think that stuff is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where we're going.
We started up here about 2.5 years ago and we had 6 people and 3 laptops. And now we've got, you know, about 300 people, 300 graphics workstations.
Check it out.
We've got a render farm of over 2,000 processors, 80 terabytes of online storage for shots and about 5 terabytes of RAM in the facilities.
I think we're one of the biggest facilities in terms of raw firepower there is in the world right now. We've built tons and tons of proprietary software.
It's been a really long haul, and we've only just got there now, just in time for the end of the movies. And now with Siege, more than doubled our capacity in terms of render and disk storage.
So it goes 3s, then 5s, and then 7. To really do Jeff's work to the detail that he creates is an extreme undertaking.
Everything is massive and epic, and 250,000 sentinels and millions of machine creatures.
The rules that we have to play with in this sequence are all real-world physics. The challenge of it is that we have no real reference because these machines don't exist.
There was one thing that whenever we came in and we did, and that was the idea that there would be sort of different types of sentinels, almost like in an ant nest.
Each sentinel has 15 tentacles and 10 underarms and 10 arms or claws, and then 32 sewing needles and 6 animatable eyes. Until you start doing all of its 15-legged performance, you don't really know how much screen space the character takes up.
Because of the way they move, because of the squid-like nature and the flowing nature of the tentacles and the fact that they fly, people thought that they were underwater. And so we're trying to make this creature fly and look fluid and at the same time make it clear that no, he's not underwater. You can get all kinds of performances out of them.
We established about 15,000 sentinels at any one time. Well, that's a pretty phenomenal number of creatures to sort of keep track of, animate, render, light, make look like every one of them is doing the right thing.
It's just a memory hog in terms of rendering.
All the different elements that will be in a shot, the dock, the characters, the platforms, the subfloor, all that sort of stuff, all have to be, brought into the same world and make it look real.
The bar continuously gets raised. Every huge film that comes out that involves a lot of complex effects. With that comes, certain things, technical aesthetic, that you're always challenged to achieve and to surpass.
It actually looks like Morpheus, doesn't it? It's kind of cool.
The new bullet time.
In terms of technology, this is the most important stuff.
We call that virtual cinematography, meaning that there's not a real camera. It's all computer generated.
A virtual shot means everything in the frame is computer graphics, CG, Neo Smith's background, everything. In Reloaded and Revolutions, these characters have absolutely ascended to a new plane. And so you need these kinds of tools to pull that off.
The first thing we need is a set. So we liaise with Owen Patterson and get a set design from his department and put that into the computer. I'm very proud of the virtual environments that we created. The cities for Trinity Saves and Trinity Falls look stunning.
Specific buildings in Sydney have been selected to be the environment.
It doesn't involve us completely making synthetic creations in the computer. We still need a real set, real lighting, and real photography to get it to work.
It's a whole procedure to shoot still photographs of subjects like buildings and other things, and then project the textures that you get from the stills back onto 3D forms in a computer 3D animation environment.
We then place pre-visualization versions of Keanu, Hugo, or Carrie Ann, and allow animators to rough out blocking to really get a better feeling for the sequences moving. The next thing that we need to do is actually start thinking about doing the shots for real.
That is a project unto itself, the human being, the perfect Neo, the perfect Agent Smith, expressions changing, fabric, hair, the whole thing.
Motion capture is a way of allowing a real actor to perform and getting that performance onto a digital body inside the computer. Because our characters are superhuman. You can't do everything as motion capture, but if we take the awesome work that can be done in the motion capture rig, we can extend it with hand animation.
His legs going back and forth instead of back, recover, boom.
Yeah. Okay. Neutral. We as humans really can read another person's face easily. We felt that we could not produce realistic-looking human faces by purely having an animator physically animates each of the characters in the scene.
We decided to build this system, which we call universal capture system, which consists of high-definition cameras and arranged around that actor's face.
The UCAP process is a proprietary process that we developed here to capture an actor's facial expressions and bring that into a digital realm.
So the trick here is to not have anyone know that they're virtual humans. That is the highest bar to jump over. The scene really has a blend of all different types of techniques. There's virtual backgrounds, virtual city. There's glistening CG glass, bullet wakes and all of that stuff.
In the first film, they sort of came out as discs, and they just kind of hung out as discs. In this shot, and in all these shots where wakes occur, there's a kind of pulsing system where it's kind of like a wave that kind of like the discs pulse in and out.
Biggest sequence that I've had involvement with is the Burly Brawl. It's really one of the first times we have like full frame CG humans and lots of them. The other thing we wanted to do is come up with camera moves that we've never really seen in movies.
Our goal was to sample what they've done and recreate it as close as possible to the real thing, but just give them the ability to move the camera like crazy.
You can basically sit there and think up any shot within your own mind and recreate it in CG, which is the beauty of it. You're not limited by a camera rig, a crew. It can all happen within a computer.
That was one of our defining anime-esque action beats.
A lot of things that he tries to do in his everyday performance, I just tried to incorporate that into his movements. He's not too worried about this fire, though, because he is Neo. He could probably turn around and control it if he wanted to. Then I assigned this UCAP performance. I've got it going so it kind of matches his movements and punches, and his teeth start gritting as he's going down the hall.
This shot started out with the first Matrix movie had the elevator lobby. A combination of fire, but with a very liquid feel, but also with sort of a semi-intelligent behavior.
With this feeling of this fire crashing down and turning corners, how the flames would hit and then open up into the claw that kind of reaches forward and just wraps around Neo.
Great examples of what you can do with virtual cinema technology, because it's a subconscious event, it's a fantasy event, but it has that hyper-realism.
To have someone say, how did they shoot that would be like, it's a pretty good compliment, I think.
And so we were learning all the time. It's like people have never done these shots before. Technology is at a place right now, and rendering is at a place, and all the advances that we've had in computers that allow us to do these kind of shots.
Look at this guy here. He does this all day. Isn't that brilliant?